Hello and welcome. My name is Kaylee Mahelko and I will be showing you how to make a needle felted witch. All you need for this project is a needle felted witch kit. So you can see here is everything that you'll need. We have the core wool, the white wool, the green, black, and you have a foam piece, which there's a needle stuck into it, and my card. So we're going to get started. I'm going to show you how to make this from these pieces. First, you just need to open up the kit and take out the wool. And I'm going to leave the foam piece in there because I actually have a thicker foam. This thicker foam is a little bit better than the other piece of foam and it's less noisy. But if you don't have a piece of foam to work with, you can use a pillow, you can use a sponge, one of those thicker like car sponges, the peanut shaped ones work well. And if you don't have one of those, you can use the foam piece that comes with this. The reason that we use a foam piece is because you're going to be working with these needles, and if you were to just stab it on the table, it wouldn't go through your piece unless it's really thick. So when we're working with flatter pieces, you want to be able to have this working part of the needle go through the fibers. And in order to do that, it has to go into something so it can actually go below the working surface. So you're going to be stabbing into the foam pad. The other reason that we use this is because this actually becomes a really usable surface where we can use it to help us shape some pieces. So let's get started. We have core wool, which is very, very soft. We also have green, which we're going to be using for the hair, so we'll put that aside for now. We have a tiny piece of white, which is for the nose, which we'll put aside for now. We have black, which will be used to make the hat and the body. After we form it, we'll cover this core wool with the black. So we're going to put that aside for now as well. We're going to unroll this core wool. You might have a few pieces in there. That's perfect. You're going to start with probably the biggest piece. Let's see here. I like to stretch it out a little bit so it looks longer and more narrow. That way it has some kind of directionality to it. And you're going to put it away from you. So I'm sitting over here, and this is going away from me, perpendicular. And we're going to do what's called a basic roll, which is the basic action, the basic technique in needle felting. So we're going to start by just rolling the wool, rolling it really tight, and as we roll, we're going to fold in the sides so that it looks kind of like a corkscrew. And just like that, you can see it. So right on top of each other. And then as we get going, you can use the foam pad to pull the wool closer and closer to you. And keep that roll going. So now you have something that's kind of like a pill shape. And we're going to start using the needle and stabbing into the pad. So this is very important. I'm going to just get this so that it stays, and then I will tell you a little bit more about these needles. This needle is a 36 gauge triangle needle. If you were to look really closely, you'd see that this part of the needle, the working part, actually has 3 sides. Don't mind my stab marks. This part has 3 sides, and it's 36 gauge triangle shaped. Where the 3 sides come together, there's little hooks cut into it. And that's what actually gets the fibers to start connecting to each other. And it gets all the loose fibers and starts making them bunch up and hook to each other. And that is how we start to form our shape. So at this level, we're just making a very kind of loose shape. Again, we're making this body. So it's going to be about the size of the witch's body. I stab a little bit on the sides, but don't worry about them too much. Okay, stab, 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 turn, stab. The more you turn it, the more symmetrical this is going to be. So you want to keep it pretty even because this is a pretty even circle, even cone shape. And we're just going to stab it till it starts to hold shape. We don't need to get this really tight or anything because we're going to be adding more. And the fluffier this is, the easier this will stick, but you do need a good solid base. Otherwise, when you add more pieces and you try to stab it on, it'll just go bleh. So we're going to take a second piece. I'm going to start at one end. I'm just going to hold it there. I'm going to gently tug. I'm going to wrap it around my piece all the way. And then stab that right onto it. Again, stab, 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 turn, stab, 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 turn. Wrap it around here. And I just did a class on these candy corn monsters, and I think I'm going to be making kits of those too. So if you like that one, stay tuned. But what I'm also going to start doing with this is picking one side to be the cone shape, the top, and the other side to be the base. And so as we're stabbing the body, we're just stabbing straight through it. But I'm going to be pinching, and I'm right-handed, so the needle's in my right hand. My fingers on my left, I'm going to pinch the top and then stab it into place. I'm going to roll and stab. And just kind of focus on that for a little bit. As you can see, the shape of my fingers is pretty much how the shape of the cone is going to end up. So don't be afraid to pinch. Stab straight down so it's going into the pad and not into your fingers. If you have a little bit of an angle there, you might grab your finger. Okay, so we're just stabbing, rolling, stabbing, rolling. Then on the flatter side, you're going to pick it up so that the bottom is pointing towards you. And we're just going to stab straight down into the piece. Now this is important because the wool goes where your needle goes. So if you're stabbing straight down, it'll start to flatten out. If you start stabbing at an angle, it's going to start making that shape. So over here is now not flat. It has started to make this angle. So I need to stab that straight down. And again, we're going to be adding one more piece, maybe two. So we just want to start getting it into that shape. Once you have a nice solid base, then we can add another piece. So here's another piece. I'll unroll it, fluff it up a little bit. And then this time I'm not going to focus too much on the top. I'm just going to focus on the bottom. And if it extends past here, that's okay. So here's how I do it. Hold it down with my thumb. Go around the bottom, wrap it kind of a corkscrew down towards the end, and then see how it's past the bottom. This part I'm going to stab into the base. And that's kind of how you start to make that base a little bit bulkier than the top. So we are stabbing that piece onto it. Again, I'm still making that V shape with my fingers. Stabbing straight down into the pad. Sometimes I like to put my index finger a little bit lower. That way I really have some control of where the needle's going. But it has to be above the working part here. Otherwise, you're going to block some of the working part of the needle. All right, now that base is really fluffy. So I am going to use the needle and pull that fiber right on top of the base here and then stab straight down to make it nice and flat. Again, still turning so that I can make it nice and symmetrical. Okay. And people ask how you know it's done. Well, I'm nowhere near done yet, but I'll show you. If you do this and it comes up like that really easily, that means it's not sturdy enough to be able to hold some more, so its shape while you add more wool. So I'm going to keep stabbing. Some felters do like to have nice fuzzy pieces, but I like them so that they're nice and firm, not too firm. They don't feel solid, but they have some shape to them that will definitely hold up over time. So I'm going to keep stabbing. And if you hear this a lot, that means you're stabbing all the way through, and there's no need for that. You want to just stab about halfway through because you're going to be working on it from the other end. So if you're stabbing through and you hear a lot of this, stabbing into the pad, that means that you're stabbing too much. So just back off a little bit and stab about halfway through. All right, so I think it's still a little bit small, and I do have some more, so I'm going to add a little bit more. This is why I like starting small and then adding as I go, because then you really have some control over the shape of it. If you start adding too much, it takes longer to felt, and it also is a lot harder to remove wool rather than add some. So start with less and then add more. Just a little. Just keep stabbing. I'm still using my fingers to make that shape. Turning every few stabs or so. Go back to that area, but I'm going to keep it moving. And it still isn't the finished shape because the black does have some bulk to it, so you're going to be adding some more thickness to it with the black. It also means I don't want this piece to be too dense, so you don't want to over felt at this point. It's better to have it a little bit too loose than a little bit too firm. So you can see I'm still getting that fuzziness when I'm gently stabbing or gently pulling. So I'm going to keep working. And this part here is a little bit too bumpy, and this part doesn't really flow. So I'm going to keep working that a little bit. And there's a difference between this stabbing sound and this stabbing sound. So this part's starting to get some bulk to it. But I know that I'm just stabbing into the wool and not into the pad. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there and start adding some black. So I'm going to get my black out of here. I tried to put these into two pieces. The smaller piece you're going to put aside for the hat, and you're just going to use this part. You're going to unroll it, and we're going to use this to cover up this piece. Now again, you can get a long piece, but I like to start small. So I'm going to cut about a 7-inch piece. And this part's thinner than this part, so I'm just peeling off a little bit. So it's all about the same thickness. Again, just kind of stretch it out a little bit. And then I'm going to start at the top. And you can stab that into place if you'd like. But now it's kind of hanging there. I'm going to use my fingers to anchor it, and I'm going to do the same thing I did to add more wool. I'm going to gently tug towards me and roll it and kind of corkscrew it down. Making sure to overlap a bit. And then that's okay, because I have more. I'm going to stab, 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 stab it all on here. This piece I'm going to use to cover the top. Okay. And then, before I get this really pinned on here, I'm going to go ahead and add a second piece. So I'm going to use a smaller piece, and I'm actually going to rip that in half. So I have a piece that's probably about 6 inches, maybe 5 inches. And I'm going to start where I left off, just overlap it a bit, curl it around, and stab it on. I use my needle going up a little bit just because this is starting to fan out. And if you do this, stab it into itself, then it gets the fibers closer up and you won't have as many holes. Again, stab, 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 keep it turning. And as soon as I make just one full turn around the whole piece, I'm going to add that next part, which should be for the bottom. Okay, there we go. I'm going to take another piece. And this piece I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to overhang it. Wrap it all the way around. Pin that on. Stab all the way around just to make sure it actually stays. And then the bottom I'm going to fold in. Now the tricky part here is if I fold this down and then fold this on top, you're going to get a seam and it's going to be a little bulky. So try not to do that. It's a little bit tricky, but for this piece I'm going to end up going like this and almost wrapping it over. And I could pull off some of this if I'd like, but it might actually just work out. Stabbing straight down to make sure that the base stays flat. Use my needle to guide where I'm putting the fibers. I'm going to wrap it up a little bit onto the body. Now I can go back over the entire body and really get this on here pretty tight. Stab, 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 turn. Okay. Keep it moving. Keep it even. Still use my fingers to pinch to guide that top. Stabbing straight into the pad. Don't stab up in the air like this. You're bound to get yourself. Don't stab on the table, because if that needle hits the table, it's pretty likely to break. And I only put one needle in each kit, so be careful with it. Okay. Just gonna keep stabbing. I'm going to flip it around a little bit just because it's easier to work toward the piece that I'm working on is towards my right hand. But I'm still pinching and rolling. Now the top doesn't really matter too much because we're going to squish that hat on top. So you almost want to leave this part fluffy, because the fluffier it is, the easier it is to stab on. But again, you need to make it a solid base, but not too dense. And that can take some time to get in tune with. But I'm just going to make it stab, stab, stab so that it's on there but loose. Not as tight as the rest of this. Okay. Now, maybe I'll go back over this a few times as I'm doing the hat. You'll probably see me going back absentmindedly just to keep stabbing. If I feel a piece that's a little too loose, like this piece right here is moving around a little bit too much for me, so I'm going to stab that a little more. But for now, it's better to just move on to the next step and then come back to it. So there's some debris in here I'll pull out and just stab that down. Okay. For now, we're going to move on to the hat and then the nose, and then we'll come back to this. So let's put this piece aside, grab the other black wool. And again, this will probably be in two parts because we're going to make the brim and we're going to make the hat piece in two separate pieces. We're going to start with the base of the brim, and that is a circle. So you're going to take the piece that is a little bit smaller or bigger. It doesn't really matter actually at this point. So we're going to take a piece, and I like to do the X. So I'm going to pull this in half, lay one piece down here, take the other piece, lay it across that way. And don't make it so that the X is so exaggerated. But if they're kind of together, you just lay them crisscross like that. Then you can take your needle and you're going to stab it into a circle. And you're going to do it about maybe 2 inches across, give or take. So from here to here. You're going to just draw that circle where the pieces cross, and then you fold in these pieces. So you see how the wool right now is stuck to my pad? Again, that's another good reason to use the pad. So we're going to roll this over, stab that down a little bit, keeping that circle going. Roll this piece in. Now if you roll it in too much, it's going to flatten out. So still roll it in, but let it follow that circle and stab it right in. Don't stab too much because then it'll get really stuck to the pad. But you want to use that pad right now for to make the shape. We're folding this piece over. Again, you can see how it's kind of making that seam there. Just want to back it off a little bit. Keep that circle going. And then this piece. And then stab just all the way across. Once it is starting to take shape, it's starting to flatten out, it's starting to make that circle, we're going to stop. Put the needle in the top right if you're right-handed, or top left if you're left-handed. We're going to gently pull this a little bit at a time off the pad, flip it over, and then we're going to stab this way. I tend to make mine really big, so you can see the difference here between this finished piece and this one. But that's okay, because what we're going to do is, and actually, I don't know if you can see that. You see how you can see my hand through this piece? So I'm going to try to make this hat brim a little bit smaller. So gently, I'm going to go around and do a 45-degree angle, stab the hat into itself, trying to keep that circle going. Can really work on that shape now. But at the same time, making it a little bit smaller. And you can see it's already starting to work. So pull it up gently, turn it, stab it in, pull, turn. And kind of leave it there and go all the way through. If it's stabbed down there, you don't really need to hold on to it. But as we start getting some progress, we're going to stop, gently pull it, flip it, go the other way. Now you can see the shape is starting to get a little messy, but that's okay. Just keep going, stabbing it into itself, focusing on those parts that are starting to look a little wobbly. I'm going at a 45-degree angle just to get the piece to come together a little bit more. And stabbing in the middle here straight down so that it stays flat. So spinning around and around, stopping, pulling, flipping, and keep going. You can keep working on this. But again, it's better to stop while you're ahead and move on. So I'm just going to do one more check, and I can still see that there's a little bit of a hole here. So I'm going to take a teeny tiny piece of the black that I didn't use. I'm going to find that, place it right on top here, and stab that into place. And now hopefully that hole has been, yep, all better. Take one more pass here. Okay. Now I'm pretty happy with that. I did see one more little hole. Take a tiny piece, stabbing it in. Okay. And you can always pull this a little bit too if you need to still work on the shape a little bit, but it does not need to be perfect. Nothing's ever a perfect circle in nature. Not that witches are, natural. but it's okay if there's like this little divot here, that's fine. I'm going to put this piece aside, take the other piece of black that I had put aside earlier, unroll it, and I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did for the body, except we're going to do it smaller. So instead of the cone shape for the body, we're going to make a cone shape for the hat. I'm going to take a little bit off of this to use to make sure that my base is bulky enough. And then I'm going to do that basic roll. So I'm going to put the wool away from me. I'm going to fold, 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 roll in if there's fibers sticking out, and then pull it towards me. You can see I'm holding down the pad, rolling it towards me. Okay, there we go. And again, same thing. Pinch that top to make the point. This is a little bit smaller, so be a little bit more careful. Stab straight down into the pad and don't move your needle too much, because that's how you might get yourself. And then the base, I'm really going to stab into, straight down into it. And you can see I'm going in kind of a circular motion. Keep it even. Don't do it too much. Go back to the body of the hat, the body of the pointy part of the hat. All right, let's see here. I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to stretch it out a little bit because I want to use it for more than just the base. And I'm going to start at the top, corkscrew it down. Add a little bit of bulk to that hat. Turn. Stab, 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 turn. Now this part, the pointy part of the hat, this kind of is important because you want it to be finished. So you will have to work on that a little bit, and you can see mine's really fuzzy right now. So I'm going to work on that a little bit. I'm going to slow down my pace. And I'm not going to pull the needle out all the way. I'm going to keep it pretty much inside the piece unless I'm turning it. Stab, stab, stab. Turn. And you can see I put it over towards my right side again because I prefer working that way. It's much harder if you're trying to do it over here. Yet your hand has to cross over. There's just more danger in it that way. So put it over to my right side. Stabby, stabby, stabby. Keep it in there. Stabby, stabby, stabby. Okay. I'm going to roll it in my hands just to kind of make sure that it's finished. And now I'm going to put these two pieces together. And in order to do that, I'm going to flip the cone for the hat upside down. I'm going to take the brim, place it in the center, and then I'm going to hold it down. That way I know exactly where the two pieces will connect. I'm going to take my needle and gently stab it through the brim into the cone. Quite a few times. Going in that circular motion, getting smaller and smaller. And then when I flip it over, it's attached. I like to attach the color, so the color band here. I like to attach that after I attach it to the witch body. So I'm going to pull up my body again. I can definitely feel some spaces where I want to continue working on it. But again, we can do that as we go along. So at this point, you can either decide to attach the hat as is, or you can add the nose first. Sometimes I like to add the nose first. That way I know what part I want facing forward, facing, the face. And that way I can make the hat tilt backwards. So if you want to do that, I will show you now how to make the nose. So we're going to pull out the tiny little piece of white. If you want the white band, like this one, you have to reserve a tiny bit of white, probably about this big, just a wisp, so you can roll it around the brim. I think for this one, I'm actually going to use the green. So I'm going to use this entire piece for the nose. Again, I'm going to kind of brush it and roll it so that we have a longer piece, and we're going to do that basic roll, but instead of it being on the pad like this where it's pointing away from me, because it's so tiny, I'm going to use the two-handed pinch method. Just made that up. I'm going to pinch and hold with my left hand, because again, I'm right-handed. And then I'm going to use my index finger and my thumb to pinch here. I'm going to roll it. I'm going to hold up the sides like this. Pinch and roll. And then I'll hold it with my thumb. Pinch and roll, pinch and roll, pinch and roll. I got some black in there. It's okay. That'll be the side that attaches to the body. So now I have kind of a pill or cone shape. I'm going to hold one side, stab away from my finger. And it's really easy for these noses to get really big. So you can stab right down into it and make it as much smaller. So you saw how tiny that piece of white was, but it's still too big if I were to leave it just like this. Okay, pinch and roll, pinch and roll. The base side, the bigger side, is going to be the part that attaches to the body, so I'm going to leave it pretty fluffy, but I will still stab into it a few times, mostly to get the inside more secure. I hold it with my fingers very gently, slowly, stab down into it, not removing it fully, not removing the needle fully from the piece. Stab, stab, stab. Also going to roll in my fingers. And I can still see a little bit of black here, so I'm going to gently pull that one little piece out. Roll. Okay. So I'm going to decide, I think I'm going to put the nose right here. So I'm going to take the fluffy end. I'm not going to put it at the top. I'm not going to put it right at the top. I'm going to actually go down a little bit. Okay, so just maybe half an inch or so, depending on how big your piece is. I'm going to put the pointy end towards my right side. I'm going to hold the nose there, and very gently with a 45-degree angle, I'm going to hit the base of the nose, stab it right into the body, get it from multiple angles. And you can see how pointy that nose is, which is fine, but I think I'm going to just flatten it out a little bit. So the way to do that is to work your way with the needle. Pad keeps moving. I'm going to work the needle up. So instead of just stabbing at the base, I'm going to stab starting here all the way through. And that's going to make all these fibers go into the body a little bit more. Okay, and then you can kind of play with the placement. And you can see we're about the same. And now we look really weird, right? But now we're going to grab the hat. And I could decide, so my hat ended up getting a little bit pointy that way. I like to put it towards the back so that it's pointing in that direction. So I'm going to hold it about where I want it. And this is going to look really weird because it's just black, 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 and a nose. But I am, again, going to do a 45-degree angle. You can see I've placed it towards the back, not straight on top. You can if you want, but I like to put it back a little bit. I'm going to stab straight from the brim into the body and then in from the cone part of the hat into the body. Focus here. I'm going to turn it. Focus here. Brim, cone, turn. Brim, cone, turn. It's getting a little wonky, but that's okay because it will all go back into place. Okay, there we go. Make sure it's pretty even. All right. So now I'm going to use a tiny little bit of this green. I'm going to roll it in my fingers and start in the center. So I'm starting here. And I'm going to roll out just a couple of times. It only needs to go around the brim once, but should overlap a bit. So here we go. And I'm going to use my needle Just stab it into place right at the base where the cone part meets the brim. And then I'm going to wrap it around so that it overlaps. And then I'm going to stab it into place all the way around. I put it right into the cone part of the hat, not into the brim, but it does cover the seam where the brim meets the cone. That makes sense, hopefully. So then there we have it. Now I'm going to brush the brim up a little bit because it's easier to put the hair on that way. I noticed that there's still a little fuzz sticking out here, so I'm going to use that as an opportunity to stab from the body up into the hat. That way it's double secured from brim to body and then from body to brim. Flip that up, stabby, stabby, stabby. Try to hit into the cone, because if you stab straight into the brim too many times, you're going to get pieces sticking out up here, and then you'll have to go back and fix it this way. Yeah, so there we go. And now we're going to add the hair. So I'm going to just put this aside for a minute. I'm going to take a piece, kind of like this. It's a little bit of a triangle. You can see that this part's pretty even. Okay, here's the witch again. I'm going to place it. You can see here, it's pretty much right over the nose, but it fans out. So I'm going to kind of do that with this one. So I'm taking the needle, stabbing it right above the nose, but letting it fan out that way. And I'm stabbing it right where we were just stabbing, right where the body meets the hat and a brim. So just stab maybe 1/4 of an inch, not just into the brim, but a little bit further down. That helps it stay where you want it. And then I like to do the other side. So instead of going around, I'm going to do one side, the other side, and then we'll fill in. So here's another piece. Okay. We'll do it this way. Stab it right over the nose. Stab about 1/4 of an inch down. There we go. It's kind of looking like that. Maybe it's a little bit too puffy. Instead of pulling some off, I'm actually going to stab up through this wool. That'll help it maintain its shape and its structure, but also help to keep it full. And again, if you stab too much through the hair into the brim, the green will pop through here. So that's why I'm really focusing on stabbing into the part where they connect, or into the body, more than up into the hat. Okay, so now we have this piece here. I'm going to take another piece. Again, just kind of fan it out so that one side is almost straight and the other side's kind of pointy. And this is too long. I don't want it to go down too far, so I'm going to pull it, make that a little bit smaller, and then stab that into place. Again, hitting the body, not up into the brim. Stabbing down about 1/4 of an inch. Checking it. Yeah, that's kind of cool. And then taking one more piece. Getting it, that top part kind of hidden under the brim. Stabby, stabby, stabby. I kind of like it when the witch's hair looks a little shaggy and, you know, not well kept. So on here you can see the clumps, and here you can kind of do that too. You can just spin the ends a little bit if you want. And then we pull the hat down, and there you have it. There's a witch. And I can still feel the base is a little bit too soft for me, so I'm going to probably spend a little bit more time refining this bottom. But overall, I could stop here and be very happy with it. If your piece isn't standing, then you can keep working on stabbing it flat. You can also just kind of push it. If you do that, you know how like a wine bottle or something has that divot in it? That helps it to stand. So if you can make that little bit of a divot, that usually is a quick tip to help it stand. And there you go, a needle felted gnome witch. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give it a like and a subscribe and all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video, perhaps making a monster candy corn. All right, thank you.